This is Coda Radio, episode 53 for June 10th, 2013. You're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is streamed live Monday over jblive.tv. It's brought to you by GoDaddy.com. I'll tell you more about GoDaddy as the show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining me every single week is our excellent host, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Hello, Chris.
Hello, Mr. Dominic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm looking at this nice prism on my desk. It's quite colorful.
Yeah, we're streaming now using Prism technology, so we just sending those out as momentums. We got this really great investor. Turns out they have connections all over the nation.
Just all over. Please don't sue me for patent infringement, federal government.
So
I did that once this month.
You and I are on a pre-WWDC buzz. We're not even really going to talk about WWDC today, but it's happening.
We're not, because we're both going to be disappointed.
Yeah, but we're acknowledging that it's happening, and but we're going to actually cover some of the tools that we use, what defines people as developers, and maybe, I like this question you have towards the end, is pragmatism even worth it? Will be something we'll be struggling with. I think it's going to be a good show today.
I think it is.
Let's start with the feedback. You ready?
Do it.
Okay, so email came in from Steve. He emailed codaradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, and Steve writes, Chris and Michael, congrats on the success of the show. It takes a lot of effort to continue a podcast for a year. Great job. I know, I'm guessing Steve must be a podcaster. Michael, since you mentioned that you wanted to do a more serious look at languages and frameworks in episode 52, or was it 51, I was wondering if you could discuss MVC a bit. I have to admit, I have followed functional or procedural coding styles for years and have not adapted to a more modern practice like OOD when I have done what's OOD?
I think he means object-oriented design.
Okay. When I have done a few programs that I've done. Okay. I've programmed in all different types of languages, Python, C++, Java, but I have not embraced OO design in a program from the outset. So he hasn't started anything using that design philosophy. Of course,
right.
This does not mean that I've not coded in them and couldn't bang one code out in something, using like in Java, utilizing classes and methods, but not really applying OOD to the overall program. It's weird that he keeps calling object-oriented design to the overall program. It's driving me crazy. It's because I keep seeing OCD. A few years ago, I noticed that MVC is really a passive paradigm, having its origins in Smalltalk and Java and other languages. I was wondering, what are the real benefits to modern programmers today? We find MVC has pushed itself into web design with frameworks like Django and JSP, CodeIgniter, and dozens of PHP frameworks. So my questions are as follows. Brace yourselves, Mr. Dominic. Is MVC a framework paradigm to fully embrace? Does it offer abstractions that take coding solutions that make them more elegant and powerful? Are there reuse benefits when it comes to new programs or porting to a different platform or framework? Thanks, Steve. All right.
Okay, comrade.
Steve has many questions around.
Many questions that would lead to many flame wars.
Well, this is sort of what I was going to say. Is this is all like it seems a lot of this is what works best for you. It sounds like, but
right, so yeah, we should probably just pop the e-break here. MVC is a very nice generic term that if you look on Wikipedia, you can get the proper definition of. Unfortunately, depending on your framework platform, MVC is kind of different, right? So, for example, iOS follows an MVC pattern, but it's a little weird. Ruby follows, Rails follows, I would say, a pure MVC pattern. But they're both called MVC, right? And this is the 5th grade or 5-year-old definition here. MVC is just the concept of separating your models, your controllers, and your views. So easily put, your business logic from your presentation logic. And having a separation of concerns. It's a pattern I use a lot, and I get a little grumpy when I can't use it, or when someone tries to lay that MVVM crap on me, which is related to MVC, to be fair. I wouldn't say that you should embrace any method as though it were a religion. Like it, it's not going to solve every problem you have. It's certainly going to help. OO design in particular will help you reuse code modules, right? But I'd be remiss if I didn't say there's also a big push against OO right now from the functional community, saying that OO is just too much abstraction and it's just too much ceremony in quotes to get things done. It's up to you, whatever helps you get your job done. I would say if you're doing Java, but you're not really doing OO, that's challenging. I guess you could write procedural Java, but Java's really, built to be OO from the jump. I would take a look at MVC. I mean, it's very popular, but again, there's different incarnations depending on your platform.
Mm-hmm.
Already then.
Okay, that is probably very pragmatic advice.
Yeah, because it's a little flame baity. It's particularly what I said about MVVM, because I'm just bad. I'm sorry, guys. Just wrong. And we'll talk about that in the main topic.
All right. So Patrick writes in, and remember last week when you and I were kind of joking around about how sometimes it feels like these tools have magic, and
yes. I remember them getting a little bit of ire in the chat room about the term magic.
We were kind of being kind of tongue-in-cheek when we were calling it magic. So Patrick writes in, he says, I've been a developer for over 10 years. I've done some Java development, some Perl back in the day, but the vast majority of what I've done has been on the MS side. I'm assuming he means Microsoft. The defining attributes of any MS tool set is that it streamlines development via abstraction as much as possible. And I always use the term magic as well. Not sure why the chat room wasn't liking it, because that is exactly what the MS tools provide. Think back to original Visual Basic. In fact, it was worse than what?
Not doing it.
Yeah, I know, right? Don't do it. Bad visual. In fact, it was worse than because the designer-generated files were binary. You couldn't see what it did. With .NET languages, the generated files are code. So the abstraction is to be expected from any mainstream MS program toolset. That's actually... I had not even thought about the fact that if you, as long as it generates code that you can open up and view, that's at least a win. Even if it's horrible code, even from an API standpoint, when you compare something like reading and writing files between .NET and Java, .NET provides a level of functionality where you can read from the stream directly, or you can with a single method call read the full file to end, decode using the default text encoder, and have it return the string. You just can't do that in Java. The downside of this is that the people that don't truly appreciate what actually happens under the covers tend to write inefficient code. They don't understand the weight of one method call versus another call. They might read the full file just to get the first line. Well, that's an excellent point.
I've seen that done a lot.
Yeah.
But, I think he goes on a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He says, on the flip side, MS is fanatical about maintaining backwards compatibility. You're practically guaranteed from an API standpoint that changes are things that will not change. Not always, but compared to anybody else, they're very reliable in that regard.
Yeah, I would say they're definitely more conservative than Apple, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, really, as far as that goes, they are, maybe only Sun Microsystems has them beat. Because I know that we had a vendor that once campaigned, this was only a few years ago, that you could still run binaries built for Solaris 1 on Solaris 10 and, etc.
Right. All right, so let's I mean, the whole bit about comparing Java to .NET directly, I think we're just going to go ahead and avoid, because that gets a little messy and people get upset, and I don't think it's really relevant to your point. And, I'm not saying magic is always a bad thing, and I don't think Chris meant that either.
No, I didn't. No. In fact, sometimes magic is the right solution for what you need to get done.
And I think the problem is, as you suggest, Patrick, that the problem is the people who don't understand that it's magic, right? Who don't understand that it's really, a function that's calling 100 lines of code that they don't know what it's doing.
Right, and that's definitely the point I think Patrick was trying to get to that in there. Right. And you see this in all kinds of applications where all of a sudden they run into silly scalability problems and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it even in recently in an ASP.NET app where someone just for looped through an array. Someone was me, but I did fix it. So
yeah, I mean, so here's the system administration equivalency to this. there is this massive website that I've been involved in that has every single page, tens of thousands of pages, statically generated by scripts. And sometimes, because there's so many pages, something goes wrong somewhere, and there's a lot of different things putting data into the system. Permissions get set wrong on maybe, say, 1,000 of the 10,000 pages, and they could be anywhere on the in the web directory. So what the sysadmin did is just, and this was not me, wrote a script that runs every few minutes. I want to say it's every 5, and checks the whole directory, which is tens of thousands of files, and then chmods everything so that way it has, and chelms everything so that way it has the right rights. And that was a great solution a few years ago when they didn't have as many users. But now that they have 3 to 4 times the traffic, the image files are all double in size, and the servers are just not handling the load very well, just the regular user traffic. And when those scripts kick off, the whole system grinds to a halt because it's this sort of brute force. Well, here's the easiest way to do it. I'll just get all these files. I'll get the whole directory listed. I'll put it all into this big list, and then I'll just run everything against it, and I won't be very picky about it. I won't just attack the specific things that I need. And this sort of solution where it lets you bang something out very quickly, and if that system never got very much use, that solution would work indefinitely. The problem became, once the system got a lot of use, it became this problem that was buried way, way, way down in the system that no one really had any knowledge of because, it's just one of these things that just kind of always worked. It was magic. The system just kind of worked. It was magic. And now it's bit us in the butt.
Yeah, and this does lead directly into the show's topic, unless Danica has anything to say.
Well, why don't we stop? That's a good tease right there. So I like that. Nice. Well, thanks, Patrick and Steve. If you guys want to contact the show, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and pop the contact link at the top of our website and choose Coder Radio from the dropdown. Or go to coderradio.reddit.com, start a thread in our subreddit. But first, before we get into the main topic, let's talk a little bit about GoDaddy.com. Go over to GoDaddy.com and use our fantastic discount codes supplied by a famous race car driver who has brown, dark hair. I can't say her name yet, but she'll be revealed soon. Haha, that's a tease. But she has a code for us. And it is Coder 249 when you check out. You get a .com for $2.49, which is great for renewals. Transfers. And first-time purchases of .coms. And if you can continue to use that code, and even if you get more than one, you still get a discount on all of the future domains. So if you buy a few .coms at once and use Coder 249, the first one will be $2.49, and then all the subsequent domain purchases are like $9.99. It's a fantastic deal. So if you've got something you've been wanting to purchase, a project you're starting on, if you're going to collaborate with a group, put something up on a site, if you get a custom domain for $2.49, why not? So Coder 249 over at GoDaddy.com. But don't forget, if you're getting yourself something other than a .com, maybe some hosting, maybe a cert, maybe we're going to try out that website builder. Use our code 35OFF4. 35OFF4, 35% off your entire order. Everything that's in that shopping cart. Just click that little I got a code link at the bottom of your shopping cart and put in 35OFF4. GoDaddy is ramping things up across the board. If you're a small business, if you're a contractor, if you're an independent developer, they're going to be rolling out a lot of things that are going to appeal to you. So go check them out. Go get your .com for $2.49. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. All right, Mr. Dominic, what is the main topic? I'm ready.
So the main topic is just the tools and using that in the vaguest way, right?
Could the tool be like anything that I use, like my Pomodoro timer? Or is it like Xcode?
I would say direct development tools, although actually, no, Pomodoro would be valid, right?
All right, well, then I only use Vi, so I'll just tune out and let you go.
Really? Not no Emacs?
Not even Vim, bro. I'm not even Vimming up in here.
Not even using Vim?
Nope.
Setting. So this kind of... This leads off our discussion at the very end of last week's show about, I'm a little frustrated with some of the WinRT tooling. And, I can see where they're going, right? That 9 times out of 10, all you're doing is pulling data from somewhere and rendering it. And if they can get that to be seamless, well, then you're in great shape. But there's some weirdness that comes along with that, right? If you go against particularly their model binding stuff, which I should say is not exclusive to Microsoft. AngularJS uses a similar pattern. Things can get a little rough, right? You're going against the grain, and you have to kind of do your own thing. I obviously don't like it, but as I've been informed by many an MS developer, that it's the best thing since sliced bread. And it's silly to have to manually pull properties out of objects and render them like that.
Is that your finger? Am I hearing finger tapping?
Is that my finger? I don't think so.
I think that was your finger because it just stopped.
Ah! Didn't even notice.
That's all right. It means you're thinking. That's it right there. So this got you thinking. You were disappointed. I think
it's not disappointing.
No,
right?
it sounds like disappointment.
So on the other side of this spectrum, you have.
There it is. You're doing it again.
Is it
tapping?
All right, my hands are up.
All right, it's fine. It must be how you. Let me see. Okay, you hear it? That's what it sounds like.
I wonder if it's the arm moving.
Maybe, or I just assumed it was you thinking. I assumed you think with your hands. I do.
I talk with my hands.
Yeah. Uh oh, they're coming to get you.
See, we did it. We didn't say good morning to the NSA.
No,
but on the other side of this, we have things like the folks who are writing in C or who are writing on anything else, almost really.
Right.
Because I would say Microsoft is definitely the biggest fan of this style. And I'm actually hard pressed to think of another company whose platform pushes that kind of development that hard. I really can't. And it's not just about MVVM or data binding, right? It's about checkbox based development, right? Where you're going in an IDE into a bunch of menus. So I could say maybe Eclipse using Java developers, but even then, you're not that close to the Visual Studio strategy of there's a WYSIWYG for everything, or there's a wizard for everything. And I don't know. I mean, on the server side, on the admin side, is that how they do things there too?
Yeah, they're in the process of transitioning in a big way right now. All of their server-side tools are transitioning to sort of this, honestly, more Linuxy, Unixy style, where you have a GUI that sits on top of a bunch of shell commands, and then that GUI executes the shell commands. Whereas in the past, right, the tools would all be manipulating the data and executing the commands themselves. They weren't necessarily sitting on top of some PowerShell interface. And now that Microsoft is sort of retooling all of this, you still have these tools that you really are essentially still the same functionality, but they're now all executing through PowerShell. So it's interesting to watch them continue to iterate on their tool set for the servers, because when they started, to look at their development arc, I would say every year they've introduced something, or every server release they've introduced something where I've been like, oh, that's actually a pretty good progressional change. There's usually some sort of something in the opposite direction as well, like something that's like, oh, I don't like that change. But for the most part, they're always pushing it forward. They're always at least trying something new, and I gotta believe they're taking input when people are saying, hey, make these more like shell commands. I mean, they seem to be doing it. And then now they have UI-less. You can run servers without a graphical interface on them, which is very, very Linuxy. They call it server core, actually. So it's not a direct parallel, but it sort of echoes, I think, your sentiment.
Right, and I think we should stop and say, at least I'm not arguing that this is necessarily a bad thing, right? Or something that we should, raise the pitchforks against. It feels very preference based, because in private discussions, the MS guys, and I mean third-party Microsoft developers, not people from Microsoft, they look at Bash and they ask you if you're on drugs, right? Or, they see me doing a lot of things from the command line, and they the 80s would like their Toolchain back, kind of stuff. Which I guess, does it seem as crazy? And I'd be very interested in people who are more on that side of things. Do what the Unixy, even the Mac guys do. Does that seem as crazy to you?
In what sense?
Well, the fact that, at least Mac developers, and I would imagine a lot of Linux developers, are super likely to write their own little script to do something tedious in their toolchain.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Right.
And then like I have like a dozen Ruby scripts that I just run from the command line to do various obnoxious tasks that are
So I would say the philosophy there is, to me, it seems like you supply the user with. It's almost like, okay, no, this is a dumb thing to say, but it's almost like making the operating system and all the tools an API versus a holistic, complete solution. So where like Unix and Linux, all of the tools and all of the ways you can chain everything together is almost like it lets the user build anything they want, and the operating system just exposes all this functionality and they have to assemble it. Whereas with the Windows tools, it'll a lot of times out of the box get you further than you could if you didn't know how to assemble all those tools on the other system on your own. But it'll
right.
quickly hit a wall.
Right. And I guess the argument would be from that point of view that, for the 90% use case, there is no wall.
Right. Well, I think that's why the tools, both on server and development, have been so, I mean, monstrously
Popular.
successful. I mean, they're hugely successful.
I mean, I don't think we can, I don't think there's an argument to be made that this method of development is unpopular because, I mean, let's be real, there's more .NET developers in general than there are, maybe Java beats them, right? I mean, it's just they're not so much in the news. We've discussed it before. The quote dark matter developers.
They're the ones that are employed by a 9 to 5 to develop internal applications.
Right, and there's more of them than there are of. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, even Java. Maybe not Java, but even anything else, really, right? Is that bad? I don't know, and that's the thing. So I don't really have an axe to grind going in here. I'm just wondering because I do strive to be pragmatic where I can be.
So like, see, here's where Cypher. So and pragmatic is a it depends. It means something different to different people. So for Cypher, because he knows how to connect the dots, to him it is much more rational and pragmatic to use that set than to use something that sort of abstracts what it's really doing and does it automatically, but then hits a wall. For him, that doesn't seem pragmatic at all. That seems short-sighted, I would imagine, right? So it depends. So I think pragmatism is in the eye of the beholder. For example, for me, if Apple today at WWDC releases a Mac Pro, I'm going to buy that Mac Pro, and I'm going to have to buy it on credit, which is breaking a rule that I have lived by my whole life, which is you shouldn't buy computer equipment on credit.
Right, because the value is faster than the interest.
Right, but pragmatically, I know that for me, in order to continue doing what I do as a living, I need that tool. And so for me, it's a very practical decision. But to a lot of people in the chat room, they think, well, why wouldn't he just build another Hackintosh? He could build it for cheaper. He could build it right now. He could put whatever he wants in there. That seems way more practical to them. And for their circumstances, it is. So I think that's where a lot of this conversation between these different tool chains and even philosophies kind of hits the wall. Is what it's hard for people to accept is until you've been in those positions. Like people like, how can the host of the Linux Action Show be saying he's going to be buying a Mac Pro? Like it melts their mind.
But that sounds more like an emotional response, honestly. When you get crap about that, I mean that doesn't feel pragmatic, right? To me,
on their part,
right.
Well, but I think in their mind, but I think to them it does seem pragmatic.
Well, all they see is the dollar amount,
right?
But they're not thinking of the potential
and
long term, right? So, I'll give you a real world example.
All right.
I've had a lot of success with Azure recently, and ASP MVC4.
NSA edition.
I highly doubt they're using Azure.
No, they just have access to it.
I'm sure they do. What a beautiful prism. Anyway, moving right along. Yeah. But it feels wrong in a lot of ways. First of all, there's a good bit of lock-in there, and we don't need to beat that horse to death because there's lock-in with any cloud.
But that's a valid consideration,
right? And there is a point where certainly by going through the WYSIWYG and a lot of the generation stuff in Visual Studio, I can get your basic REST JSON API up, an order of magnitude faster than I could manually. and whether it's in Rails or Java Player or whatever. And I have very little ASP.NET, experience, right? Which is awesome. I mean, you can't fault them for that.
So
But I'm
what?
wondering, is that bad? Is that
So what you're saying is, what I hear you saying is, hey, I can get to where I could normally get in a lot shorter time.
yeah, which is about half the time.
Yeah, that is something I struggle with a lot.
One of
A lot.
so, but there's a few problems that I've noticed with it. One is it's very hard to sell it to people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What? Are they concerned about it being on Azure? Is that like something they go, oh, Azure? Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I maybe I shouldn't say this, but the companies that would be interested in .NET are also very interested in foreign development,
Gotcha.
and they're somewhat not willing to pay the rates that right? Because I don't.
They're probably worried about the NSA.
Right.
I kind of joke, but there was an article that ran that said like, hey, by the way, people who are, if you're working for people that are outside the country and developing applications, they might start requesting you not to host it in the U.S. And so Azure's in the U.S. So that could be a consideration for some clients.
So they actually have a data center in Singapore, but
I wonder how the rules apply to that. I don't
I
know.
have no idea. I
Yeah.
mean, that's not really
Yeah.
super relevant.
So the point being that they, for whatever reason, just were like, no, we don't want that for the price or whatever.
Right, and they're willing to pay more. So this is interesting. They're, the .NET shops either have an in-house guy that they're paying virtually nothing, or they're offshoring it. The other shops, let's say startups that don't have anything, don't see value in it, which is really interesting.
They don't see value in it.
Right now,
For them, they'd rather build the whole
they,
stack themselves.
they'd even rather Rails, right? And that's usually the big competitors, Rails. And I think some of it's a bias, right? Because some of these guys kind of have memories of dealing with, Microsoft in the '90s, things like that.
Right.
But a lot of it's, none of these people are talking about concern about the source code not being open. That's not even a thing. It's not even an open discussion. And it's not even that Microsoft could change the price in Azure. It's that it's written in .NET, which I find really interesting. Because they're willing to take a higher estimate for a different stack just to not be on that stack.
I have always had the reverse. I've never had anybody not decline because of. That's interesting. So they're very involved at a very technical level in this decision making process. Usually, when I come in, the people are not at that level involved. They might look at it a pricing standpoint, but they won't, say, well, .NET versus Ruby, blah blah blah.
Yeah. So for an example, the title of the person I'm usually dealing with is like CTO, but he's CTO of like a 4-man company, right, or a 5-man company.
So he's technical. He's an actual technical CTO. He's actually
right. Yeah. Now I'm starting to see that part of its image. Even though they're not really open source companies, in fact, they usually sell proprietary software. It's not sexy to develop on .NET right now. And it's much more hip to be, our backend's in Rails or Sinatra or Django or something like that.
Well, and if you want to get the trendy designers, because, there's these boutique designers that you bring in who make your site look beautiful, and they're not going to want to work on .NET because they're trendy. Right? Isn't that a concern?
I suppose.
See, I'm coming at this from the corporate world where .NET is a huge perk. In fact, they're looking for .NET developers, and there's a ton of people who they're looking for who wrote in .NET that they want to move over to just use straight up HTML5, and that's where I see a ton of the market. So I've never really in Washington State had a client that said, "Oh, Azure."
Well, I think part of that might be you're in Washington State.
Yeah, no, it totally is.
In New Jersey, and more importantly, New York. Really not a sell. I can't sell it.
That is really that's a bad sign for Microsoft, boy.
And I feel like I've lost deals because I've tried to sell it, even though the quote is lower than you would think, right?
And that's because your development time is less.
Right, because I can generate a bunch of crap. And yes, Rails is generation.
What about something crazy like doing your own, like rolling your own solution where you just have like these like EC2 instances or these VPS images that you just turn on and say, all right, I'll throw you on this, and you have your whole stack already set up, and you charge them for it.
Usually these startups want to own their infrastructure.
Yeah, plus you got other things to do other than run servers.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Well, see, this is always the thing I still run up against is people want on-site. They want on-premises servers. They want all of the data on-site. These guys are willing to buy racks in data centers and go out and buy servers and put them in these racks. And that's what they want to do.
Yeah. So we should be clear. The space I'm talking about is, the mobile space, the HTML5 space, stuff like that. There's obviously tons of .NET work in more enterprisey areas. And
that's
I'm sure
what I was trying to illustrate is it depends on your area, because I think I've been completely oblivious to this trend, I think.
But remember, today's rinky-dinky startup is tomorrow's mid-sized business, and then a week from now is enterprise, if they don't go out of business in a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they can't, they're giving the tools away, and they just can't get a foothold. Which, I really don't care either way.
It seems like to be the case for all of the current generation of products. Everything they've put out there seems to have a set of benefits, but is not gaining traction. Not to any degree that matters.
And so this kind of brings me to my point. I'm coming out with this very pragmatic argument of you're going to save, a relatively significant amount of money here. Oh, you're not interested because it's not what you would like to tell people you're using. To me, that's not pragmatic. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe startup journalists, maybe they prefer to hear you have an open source backend or whatever. But it just seems like, especially for these price sensitive companies, that it's very strange, and it has me questioning: is there a point to pragmatism?
That's really interesting because
is your technology stack just another form of marketing? Is it just another form of branding?
Maybe it is.
Right.
And so then, if you're not making decisions based on practical choices, what do you? I don't like where that leads to. I don't like trendy. I don't like trends getting into our sound, rational development choices. That sounds like a bad mix.
It does. I'm hearing a lot about node and event driven development. Oh, okay. How many concurrent users do you have? Oh, we're not public. We don't have any. We have like 10. So what do you care?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like, I understand you need to be able to scale, but you're solving a problem that you're never going to have.
Right.
Or if you do have it, you'll have enough money that it won't matter. And I'm.
So then what do you do? What do you do? Then so what do you do? Do you just do, if you're not going to do, the implications of this, if we were to say go down the full path for a few years where this trend continues to sort of flesh out, the implications of this are that people shouldn't choose the development languages they embrace based on practical solutions. They should choose based on their emotional whim and become a specialist and then hope for boutique development jobs. Where does this lead to?
So that's kind of what I'm thinking. What happens to all these boutique Rails guys when Rails is, just like Java and .NET,
exactly.
It's easily offshoreable? And even removing that aspect, because I know a lot of our audience is worldwide, and obviously.
Do you think that's part of what's driving this? Is some of it's coming from the developers who are just looking to move to the next language that isn't going to be immediately commoditized? Is that part of what's happening here?
I guess, but you promise you can't rip down your whole application every 5 years.
Right.
I guess you can, but no proper business executive is going to.
Maybe that's how it works. Is maybe the trendy developers who are always moving to the next thing, so that way they can stay at a high paid rate and stay valuable. They move on to the next thing, whatever Ruby's replacement is, and then the offshore developers come along and they maintain all of this Ruby code that's been created during the boom.
That may be true, but what does that say about the people making the decision, right? Because I don't believe that a bunch of trendy guys are coming into all these businesses saying, yeah, you know what, you got to do Rails. Why should we do Rails? Oh, Rails is sexy, bro.
I don't think it's that. I think it's, hey, what's our competitor doing? Or, hey, that new upstart app that's actually eating away at our customer base, what are they doing? We got to do our app like that. Or, hey, that really cool app I like, I want our app to be like that. Can we make our app like this one? That's what the
So for
CEO
me,
says.
that works on the design side, but your infrastructure doesn't play into that generally, right?
Unless you go to like some all-in-one solution shop where they do the design, they do the coding,
Right.
and they do the hosting.
Yeah. I mean, if you're right, and it's just, developers trying to keep a certain rate, and that's why I don't do certain types of work, because you can't get the rate I'm looking for. That's fine, and that's not a bad thing. But if it's because it's trendy or because it's hot, that's a little scary, right?
I think it's very scary. It
Right.
leads to all kinds of implications.
Right.
People won't be very trained up on it. It won't have time to get fleshed out properly, so all of the security implications are fully understood. It leads to always being developed tools that are never quite where they need to be yet because they haven't had years and years and years of refinement.
Here's a perfect example that's better than the back end to use. Front end JavaScript. How many JavaScript frameworks have come out in the last 2 years? Like, really,
Yeah.
I tweeted earlier this week just saying, you know what, I'm not even going to look at the new ones. Like, can we
I'm
just
done.
stop?
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah. That anything that's not 1.0 or better, I'm just not looking. Because we have Angular, we have Backbone, we have Ember, we have, and just about everything in between, right? I think there's even one like Good JS or something. How many times are we going to solve the same problem? And what happens if you went with, let's say, Angular, and then Angular loses, because eventually the field's going to have to be thinned,
Right. Well,
there's going to
I would
be there's
think.
going to be two winners, just like in every other field. You're going to have two, a winner and a B winner, and that's what everybody does. And what happens if you didn't pick that? I don't know.
I guess you rewrite.
I mean, off the top of my head, I just named what, 5, and there are plenty more.
I think you rewrite. And this was this was going to be my question to you, is in your experience, do you really genuinely write something once and then maintain it indefinitely, or does something get written and then 4 or 5 years into it you decide to rewrite major parts of it anyways, almost inevitably? Is that always what inevitably happens? And at that point, are you worrying about it too much? Because then,
Well, so I think there's a big difference, particularly in the JavaScript area, right? So let's use the Cocoa example or the .NET example. I have a lot of Mac apps that were written a long time ago,
yeah,
but you're always using Cocoa for the most part. So yes, we're modernizing them when we do new things. We're ripping out modules and we're putting in new versions of those modules using the newest APIs and the newest, methods that have come out, better ways to do things.
mm-hmm.
But Cocoa is still there, and there's still, a Cocoa developer is still a Cocoa developer, is still a Cocoa developer, right? What happens? I'm not picking on Angular. It's just one I don't like, so I'm going to pick on it. That was so
wait, what?
Let's say Angular loses, and all these indie devs are like, well, I'm not going to train up on Angular because screw that, right? Backbone won. Backbone should win. What happens when you have an Angular app and you're a biz dev guy, and now your boss is saying, hey, we need to modernize this. We need some new stuff. Fisher Productions down the street is kicking the crap out of us.
Hello.
Right. Oh, I can't find an Angular dev. Or this Angular dev is charging double because,
that's what happens. That's what
happens.
He's
the only one in the area.
Yeah, somebody becomes the Angular dev guy, and he gets business for the rest of his life because everybody knows there's only one Angular dev guy.
So, and I'm just seeing people throw themselves into these new frameworks with such vigor. Like, I mean, I like Cocoa, but I'm not in love with Cocoa.
You know
right?
what happens sometimes something new comes along. I see this a lot with server-side stuff too, is like it's experimental, it's new, it's not well supported, but holy crap, it does that one thing that I really, really need done for this project very easily. So it's kind of like your Azure thing a little bit. It's kind of like, boy, man, half the time I know I shouldn't use Angular because it might not be around. And of course, who knows? Angular, could be around forever.
But the problem is most of these JavaScript frameworks they're solving relatively the same problems.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up as well in that example.
Right. It's not like, oh my God, this does something we never thought of. It's, this gives us Prism in a box. That's number 5, by the way.
Did you see there's a Ruby, we shouldn't keep bringing it up, but there's like I linked it in last. It's like a little a dashboard you can add to any of your Ruby apps to give the NSA a control panel backdoor to all your customer data. And it's already put up on GitHub.
I think that's very considerate.
Oh, wait, you linked it on Twitter.
I did link it on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's where I found it.
Yes.
Too funny. It's all in good
I mean,
jest.
I'm just saying, I bet you the NSA is not, throwing themselves into .010 products, right?
Now you watch. It's gonna come out that whole thing was a Chinese prank.
It'd be hilarious. Oh, we got you so good. I would. Well, wait. The president of China was just over here visiting Obama. Maybe he was like,
Dude,
"Here's what we're gonna
it
do."
came out the day before their meeting, and then the guy who does the leaking ends up in Hong Kong. Just saying. Just saying.
I can imagine how that lunch went. So, what you doing, Barack? Awfully high and mighty, ain't you?
Right. Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying, Chinese government would not be throwing themselves into untested technology.
I believe it. I believe it. No, in fact, it looks like most are hacking. They're usually targeting well-established and broken technology.
And I think that's very responsible.
I guess the problem is what you're proposing. You are obviously, so you are at the same time saying that maybe pragmatism is going out the door. You are giving a very pragmatic argument as to why you shouldn't use, like, say, one of these new upstart.
In production, yeah. I mean, obviously,
but you see where the conflict is here. I mean, at some point, you got to try something new. You got to take the risk to try something new.
So I'm not saying you should be dogmatic and, my daddy wrote VBasic, I write V, not like that. I'm just saying, don't bet the farm on all this new stuff, right?
When do you know to make that jump, though? Because let's go back to Ruby.
Sure.
Early on, people were probably saying the same. Ruby on Rails. Ruby. What are you doing,
okay,
you
but
kids?
No, but there was a legitimate reason to use Rails, and you have to have in the context of the time.
All right, lay it on me, brother.
Rails at the time was the fastest way to get something done, and I'm saying that with an asterisk. I know people, Ninja PHP developers will say, "Oh, we can do it just as fast."
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
For the average dev, it was the fastest way to do it. And Microsoft did not have an offering that followed an MVC pattern that was similar at the time it came out. Right? ASP.NET MVC, sorry guys, but it's basically a copy of Rails, right? It's Rails with C#. Kind of like C# is a copy of Java, but moving along.
Ouch.
At the time, the reason you did Rails is because it was development time was faster. And any performance loss, well, it was cheaper to buy hardware than it was to pay developers for additional work. Right? That was the justification.
Yeah.
So you were optimizing for dev time. Right now,
okay,
I don't know
I see your argument. I guess my point is that it still seems like there must have been questions at some point whether it was the right direction to go, and people just had to start embracing it.
Well, there was, but what happened is the other communities ended up copying Rails.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that is the interesting thing: is the existing stakeholders, the incumbents. If something new and fancy does something right, eventually those old slow incumbents start integrating those features into their offerings. And so that's sometimes another argument too, if you can hold out and not jump to the new shiny, and if you're a patient person and you don't need those features right away.
No, because if you were doing, let's say, an ASP site when Rails came out, moving to ASP MVC was not exactly seamless for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think, well, I guess so. I mean, I'm actually rethinking through my examples I was going to make, and my argument was going to be, if you waited long enough, they'll introduce the feature, and then you can just sort of transition to it. But I suppose if they do a really clunky job or a half-assed implementation of the feature, which is actually generally more likely the case, it doesn't really work out.
Yeah, and I think we should, just focus back a little. I'm seeing more people identifying themselves with their tool chains. And this happens a lot with Apple developers, right? With their weird design worship.
The Toolchain wars.
Well, it's almost like platform wars. It's kind of like the guys who hate Ubuntu randomly who've been running it for 5 years.
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have anything to say to them? Anything you'd like to add?
I'm sorry. Are you referencing me? Because I don't hate Ubuntu.
That's not what I've been
told. I'm enjoying Arch at the moment.
That's not what I've heard.
Of course.
No, but it's just interesting to me that, and this is going to hit it too hard, and we're going to get feedback, that people are now identifying themselves as, the tools you use, the language you use is now a reflection on you.
Yeah.
Where, so if I ask you to picture a Rails developer, what are you going to describe to me?
A little hipster, a little bit.
Right. Little thin guy, kind of tall, kind of lanky, brown hair, a little long, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can picture him right now, probably in a Starbucks.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously, everything we're saying to him is ridiculous.
Yeah, and he thinks we're all on drugs, of course. Same thing. Picture me a Pearl guy.
I picture Randall Schwartz, a little Unixy, a little bumbling, maybe a little
Something of a
disheveled.
beard.
Yeah,
Give me the
yeah,
beard.
yeah, a little unkept.
Yeah. Right. Give me a Mac
Oh,
guy. He's got a French press full of coffee.
Matt guy's probably a Ruby guy.
They might be buddies at least.
Yeah, they definitely probably share jackets.
Yeah, definitely cousins at the minimum, right? They go to each other's birthday parties.
And you can do the same thing. .NET guy. He's wearing a very nice work appropriate button up shirt with a collar, and
He's washing his car every Friday during lunch.
he
Yeah.
might have khakis. Except for on Fridays, he gets to wear jeans.
We are going to get into such a fuck. We're going to have so much crap about this.
No, what we're doing is just pointing out this. I think it is human nature to join tribes, and you identify
Yeah.
yourself with your desktop. You identify yourself with your Toolchain. I mean, people walk around with brands on their shirt because they consider themselves an Adidas guy, or I wear Oki sunglasses. I'm an Oki guy. I mean, I'm just giving an example.
Okie dokie.
Or I'm an Android guy. That might be a better example.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with Android.
Hey, oh. No, dude, HTC One is
Yeah, how are you liking
amazing.
it?
Amazing. And the battery life is awesome. I don't know. People online were complaining about the battery life. I'm running like 8 hours
Wait,
on my.
I'm sorry. Breaking news. .NET guys can now wear jeans every day.
Oh, good for them.
Good for them.
Anyways, I just gotta say, HTC One is if you were thinking about getting the HTC One, full hearty recommendation. I still prefer the screen size of the Note, but the overall fitting in my pocket, the HTC One's much nicer. And the IR blaster sounds like a gimmick. I have a 3 remote situation in my living room, and I have toddlers that like to hide remotes. And I gotta tell you, it is amazing. I can turn on my TV and my receiver and then control my Roku all from my phone. And it's full on IR. And you just tell it what make and model you have, and it goes and downloads it from HTC's database. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I have not figured out how to do that.
It took me 30 seconds to set up both my TV and receiver. I didn't even have to do any training or anything.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible, dude. And so now you just like point my TV at the devices and they all turn on.
And it just works?
Yeah, it just freaking works.
I'm sorry. Just works slogan mark TM.
Yeah,
I'm
an Apple guy. I'm an Apple guy, or I'm an HTC One guy. I mean, there's a lot of that.
Well, see, I'm a blasphemer. I have my HTC One right next to a French press and a MacBook Air.
Right.
I'm wrong.
I can't.
shouldn't exist.
Yeah. I think what you said is very astute. You have what used to be the Windows versus Linux versus Mac guys, and now it's sort of that is less important. It's interesting how that parallels how that seems like those operating systems are becoming less important just in general, even though I hate to think so. And so people are moving on to new things, and they're making new tribes and new clans, and people like they look at the values of what a toolchain and what Ruby on Rails, they look at that and say, this is what it accomplishes. This is the philosophy behind it. I can embrace that. Just like Stallman followers do for free software. But it clouds judgment. It removes that practical element.
Yeah, but see that's getting very close to religion, right? Where there's a philosophy that you just follow, and
yeah, well,
you're kind of down with that no matter what.
I think that's what people tend to do.
Scares me.
It's going too far. You get lost. But see, the flip side is I kind of envy some of these people because they like these Ruby on Rails guys. They go so deep into it that they become absolute rock stars in that area. And while that language is booming, they are at the top of their game. And for me, I just can't get into something that deeply unless there's something innately about it that just really drives me. Researching Bitcoin was like that for me. All of a sudden something lit up and I just totally dove in. But normally I'm very practical about things and I don't, go totally deep. For people who do, there's a huge advantage. So I don't really want to disparage those people. I don't want to come here and make it sound like we're making fun of Ruby on Rails developers or hipsters.
I don't think they're bad people. Well, I do think hipsters are bad people. But no, I'm kidding. Hipsters, calm down. Don't throw paps at me.
Negative in the freedom dimension.
I cut him off. Good. I didn't know I could do that.
No, he's cutting you off. He disagrees with you, but that's all right.
Stallman loves Ruby. I don't. So yeah, I think we got too negative. I don't think anything but VB6 is necessarily bad. DB6 is like the One Ring of Sauron. That is intrinsically evil.
Okay, all right.
Everything else, I'm willing to listen, but what really put me off is this conversation I had a few weeks ago where the dude didn't want to listen, right?
Yeah.
The answer was Rails because Rails is sexy, was
Yeah.
basically the way the conversation went. And, I talked to other developers, I know, and there is some of that. There's also a lot of, I'm sure if we could bring in a .NET guy right now, and he'd be like, well, all you kids should stop playing with that open source crap because, it's not, quote, professional, right? I'm sure we could find this guy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure his name is
I used to
Scott
work
Hanselman.
for one of them.
I've done work for them. They exist. And they're just as close-minded.
Yeah.
I worry about what's going to happen, right? I'll give you an example. When I tell someone that, I think Java would be a good choice, they rattle off, every security exploit that's happened last year.
Right.
And then they say, but Rails is great. Rails had some fairly major issues in the security area. And I'm not meaning to fearmonger. It's just weird how there's
the larger problem here is the internet allows for a huge degree of confirmation bias, where you can sort of just narrow in on the stories you want and on the information you want to collect. So if you want to believe Java is bad and something else is the savior, you can focus your whole world so that everything just looks like that. And then people just suck it all up, and they don't like look at the whole picture and consider everything, consider all of the pros and cons of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the course of the show, I've personally gone out of my way to try different stuff, right? I mean, I tried WinRT, and I'm definitely disappointed the way it's going, but that doesn't mean I outright hate it, right? And so I'm just wondering, is there a benefit to being pragmatic anymore when you're almost excluding yourself from, as Chris mentioned, the tribe, right?
Yeah.
I'll give an example. As an Apple developer, in quotes, who doesn't believe that design is more important than functionality, and who is okay with hiring designers and making it clear that they work under me, right? Like they're subservient.
Hearsay.
Exactly. To them, and I've seen cases where developers hire designers and literally given them unlimited budget and unlimited free reign.
Johnny Ive.
Because I'm talking even on a smaller scale. People who really can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
Or there's recently an app that just came out by Gruber that literally does virtually nothing.
The note
but it
thing?
looks.
Does it take notes?
It takes notes, but it doesn't sync to anything. If you have two devices, you get two sets of notes. And
oh my gosh.
I mean, I get why it doesn't sync to iCloud because it doesn't work. But
man, if only too bad there's just a few other note-taking apps out there.
But it is $5 and it's on the iPhone and it's doing fairly well.
Well,
if you look
of course.
Right. So I'm almost wondering, is by not, you would say the whole team that did that app definitely joined the tribe, right? They're on the council.
Oh yeah.
Is it stupid not to? Is it dumb to be pragmatic? Is by excluding yourself and being neutral, do you hurt yourself?
I think maybe, and I'll tell you, I have stuck to this regardless. So you know me, sometimes this show, I come on here and I rail against Google. So I'm not Google's biggest fan, but I was in at a client and they are developing this entire in-house analytic system to track clicks, to track the path people in the site. They're building this whole thing around AW stats. It's monstrous. And I said to them, why don't we just use Google Analytics? Nothing here is confidential. Why don't we just use Google Analytics and they'll do all of this for us, and they have a much better, interface. You can set up accounts, you can tie it to your Google Apps account. And their response simply was, no, we're not going to have Google tracking our site. We're not going to use Google. And they use Google for their email. They use Google for docs. But for this thing, no, we're not using Google for that. That's invasive privacy. Okay, and so instead, they're spending thousands of dollars, literally months and thousands of dollars to have people write an analytics system for them, and based around AW stats. So they're kind of using some open code already. But for me, that was a very practical. Well, they've already solved this problem, and you don't have anything confidential. So let's just go with this. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And Now I honestly believe they don't consider my opinion as valid anymore. Like the guys that said, "Oh, we can write that and you'll own all the data yourself." They're the ones that are answering all the technical questions. They're the ones that they're going to because they're giving them the answers they want. And because I was giving them the practical answer, I'm kind of shut out from the process now.
Yeah, that happens. There are winners and losers, and especially when I think I do a fair amount of beating up on Google myself, but I often recommend Google Analytics because it makes sense, right?
Yeah, and their arguments were weak too. They were like, "Oh no, it slows your computer down." They talked about like how your whole site won't load until the analytics loads, and which is not true anymore. It hasn't been true for a long time.
For 3 years, I think. But okay.
All these old arguments.
Right.
And the pragmatist, I think I did pay for it. But at the end of the day, I believe my clients hire me for what I truly think is the right solution. And I just have to do that. That's what I have. That has to be I just have to go with my gut. And so for me, that's being pragmatic about things. And for some people, I just think that's the product they want. And for other people, that's
I'm not suggesting that everyone in the startup space is crazy.
No. Just most.
Well, I think there's a trend, and I think it's not helping that the people who publicize these products in these startups like to follow these trends and like to follow personalities and things like that.
And capitalize on the trends.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many TechCrunch articles have you read, blah, blah, releases new app, when if you search the store, there are at least 3 or other competitors that came out first.
Every time.
That got no coverage.
Every time.
Yes. I don't know that that's good. I don't know that it's bad, and
yeah, I don't necessarily think it's bad in the sense that you lost a customer that time, and maybe thousands of times that time, but there is a little tiny bit of a rising tide aspect to it. It's like you look at the Twit network. Every time the Twit network buys a sponsor, that's not me making money, but that's money going into the podcasting economy, which sort of legitimizes the economy, gets more people buying ads in the economy. It gets the listeners more acquainted with ads in podcasts. So it's still actually, in some remote aspects, good for Jupiter Broadcasting.
I don't think there's like an adversarial relationship here, and I know it's coming off that way. I'll give you an example. I love to criticize Marco Arment because it makes me happy. But I actually agree with him. I would say I agree with 80% of what he says. It's just that 20%, I think he's really, really wrong. Right? But, I don't think you need to completely reject what your colleagues in your space are doing. But, all right, I will bet virtually any amount of money that we're going to have Johnny Ives flat design today, right? And I have no pre-knowledge of this. I'm just guessing. Does that mean flat design is the way to go?
Mm-hmm.
How about this? The people who've been, raging on skeuomorphism for years and were criticized. Well, are they now right? And is everybody who criticized them now wrong? Because Johnny Ives said so, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of tribalism that's worrying me, especially when it comes to picking your server, right? Or your database stack.
Mm-hmm.
Give an example. Oh, we're going with Postgres. Why? Oh, it's not MySQL.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's a bigger deal, isn't it?
Right. Or better yet, MongoDB. Oh, why Mongo? Why no SQL? Well, why not just a straight Postgres or MySQL?
I got to tell you, this is actually making me feel a little vindicated. This is a pressure that I have been feeling for years that you are putting into words from a completely different angle of it that I am realizing is this. We are both suffering from the same problem where people are choosing the stacks based on trendy reasons and not.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is becoming. It's something I've noticed for a couple of years, and it has resulted in me deploying things that I'm extremely unproud of, and it is one of the reasons I'm spinning down my IT contracting business, because that's not a business I want to be in anymore.
One of the things that I often end up fighting against and often losing is people who want to use MongoDB in particular, but also other NoSQL databases, but they try to reproduce but really their data is relational, right? Like they're reproducing relational relationships anyway. I know that's a very strange sentence. They would have been better served by a Postgres or a MySQL or even an MS SQL, right? It's like they really wanted a relational database, but they want to use something new.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good trick, MariaDB, by the way, because it's technically new. I've never done that to anyone, but it worries me because I can name, and I can't really name them, but I know of them. I just can't talk about them. 3 cases where that's happened, and it's come back to bite them, where they would have been better off just going the traditional, Postgres or MySQL route. But they didn't because Mongo, somebody from 37 Signals or wherever was blogging about how wonderful and how web scale Mongo is, when really their data was all relational.
People just following the tribal leaders.
Can I vote them off the island? Is this Survivor?
Not yet, but I think we're getting there.
Well, I think there's going to be, especially in the Mongo case, I think we should have led with that case. There are going to be problems that are serious enough that a lot of these folks are going to have to re-architect.
That'll be interesting. Maybe there'll be money to be made there. Although it's never a good idea to catch a falling knife.
To be honest, I hate those projects. I
do too, dude. I do too.
I recently got into a rescue project that was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so far gone that literally I ended up telling the guy, you know what, you'd be better off just throwing this all out. Like, just, there's no point.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, well, I have a book this week.
Oh, right. Right on. People love the book picks. What do we got?
So it's an Audible book, but I'm sure it's available on Kindle as well.
Okay. I'll take a look. If it is, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, The New Digital Age by good old Mr. Schmidt.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I've heard this is a bit of a fearmonger book a little bit about the new cyber era.
I wouldn't say fear, though I did line my house with tinfoil.
Okay.
It is a little... It's a weird book, to be honest with you, because on the one hand, they feel that, data, in particular, the type of data Google has, is going to solve all the world's problem. On the other hand, it's going to lead to all these other problems.
Right.
And
well, it's got to be an interesting insight. I think you can look at it. You can look at it from different angles, but one angle that you definitely can rely on is the fact that it's an interesting insight into Eric Schmidt, who obviously is very up in Google, where his mind is at and all this stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a good listen or a good read. But it's one of those books that I think a lot of people aren't going to agree with.
Oh, very interesting. We will have links to both the Audible edition and the Kindle or whatever edition Amazon has in the show notes. Both of those will be in affiliate links. If you use that, you support the network. By the way, the Audible one, if you've never signed up before, you get it for free for your first account. If it's your first book, and then if you cancel, you still get to keep that book. So that's a pretty good deal. And those audiobooks are awesome. Man, the HTC One is awesome for audiobooks. The speakers on the HTC One are almost good enough that I don't even think I'm going to get like a Bluetooth speaker or anything like that because they're just super loud, super clear. So I'm just listening to podcasts right there on the HTC One and audiobooks.
As am I. Now, I haven't listened to Last this week.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to enjoy it? Did you get any hate mail?
No, I think you'll like this episode. Actually, this episode's good because we kind of took advantage of the NSA news and just said, here's some great tools for encryption, for privacy.
You should be nice to them. They're probably half our listenership.
Yeah. No, I am giving them job security by making their job a little more challenging. That's what I'm doing. All right, Mr. Dominic, where should people follow you throughout the week?
They can find me at Dumanuko on Twitter and at DominicM.com.
I like the enthusiasm there, and you know what? We got links to that in the show notes. You can go find those. Don't forget, Coda Radio is live 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, over at jblive.tv and jblive.info for the audio. Coda Radio comes out Monday afternoons over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. We're also available in the iTunes Store if you want to give us a review or rating. And we have subscribe links for your favorite RSS reader on the site. Just check the show notes for every episode. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Coda Radio. See you right back here next week.